Beaumont Hills hadn't changed, not really. The air still smelled of manicured roses and superiority. 9 years gone, and yet every cobblestone on the path to the country club's entrance still remembered the soles of my old shoes. Maybe that's why I didn't hesitate when I stepped out of the black car and adjusted my cufflinks. My name wasn't on the guest list. I knew that the moment I opened the email invitation I was never meant to receive. But this wasn't about courtesy. It wasn't even about closure. It was about showing them I still existed. No, more than that, I'd evolved. The chandeliers inside dripped light like gold tears, sparkling with the weight of old money. The kind that forgets people like me ever existed. I wasn't supposed to be in that room, but I walked in like it belonged to me anyway. I felt the music roll over me, the polite laughter, the hiss of expensive champagne being poured into thinner-than-air flutes. My shoes clicked against marble that cost more than my first apartment, but I didn't blink. If anything, I smiled. The moment was cinematic. And in every good film, there's always that beat of silence before the crowd notices something or someone. That beat ended when Claudia Whitmore's ice-chipped voice sliced through the air. Her posture, upright and proud, snapped like a bowstring as her eyes found me. The conversation around her paused. Champagne flutes stilled mid-air. "Why is this failure here?" she demanded, her words not even whispered, not even cloaked in the passive aggression this crowd was so known for. "No," she said it aloud. "Proud. Cruel. And, honestly, expected." She looked exactly the same, stiff shoulders, pearls wound around her throat like a leash she gave herself permission to wear. I didn't flinch. Then came Juliet. My ex-wife stood near the marble bar, laughing with a circle of women whose perfume smelled like designer guilt and whose heels clicked like judgment. She turned slowly, graceful as ever, and let her eyes skim me with the same disinterest you'd give to a fly on your wine glass. "You're not on the guest list," she said, voice honeyed and sharp. There she was, Juliet Whitmore. Once my wife, now a stranger wrapped in sequins and smirks. Her dress glittered like it had something to prove. I remembered when I used to unzip those dresses, back when she still laughed with her eyes and called my name in the dark like it meant something. Now, her eyes barely moved as she dismissed me. That should have been the end. They expected me to turn around, to leave, to shrink like a good ex-husband and disappear into whatever they imagined a failure, like me did after the credits rolled. But I didn't move. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't beg for dignity. I smiled. Slow. Sharp. The kind of smile you give someone right before the storm begins. "That's the thing about ghosts," I said, my voice low enough that only the nearest tables could hear, but loud enough for the echo to carry. "We show up when the house is still haunted." And I watched it land. The words curled around Claudia's throat. Juliet's gaze didn't waver, but her fingers twitched ever so slightly around the stem of her glass. Her friends whispered behind manicured hands. The music kept playing, but it felt quieter somehow, as if the room itself was tilting toward the tension like iron toward a magnet. I didn't stay long after that. I didn't need to. I walked the length of that ballroom like a man walking through a museum of his own past. Everything was just as I remembered. Gilded frames, oil paintings of donors with empty eyes. A world that once decided I wasn't worthy, that once spat me out like gum under a shoe. But the difference? This time, I wasn't here to beg for re-entry. I was here to remind them that I never left. As I reached the exit, someone muttered, "Was that Silas?" Silas Whitmore. The name still sounded strange on other people's tongues. I kept it, legally, not because I needed their name, but because I wanted it on every document, every news article, every plaque that bore my work. Let them see it and remember that I was the man they tried to erase. Outside, the air was crisp. The valet blinked at me, clearly not recognizing the man standing in a custom-tailored suit with the jaw of someone who'd rebuilt himself. "Car for Silas Whitmore," I said evenly. As he sprinted off, I let myself look back at the club just once. Not in longing, but in warning. I had returned. And this time, I wasn't coming empty-handed. They like to rewrite history in places like Beaumont Hills. Polished lies, subtle omissions, memories scrubbed clean with money and influence. But I remember everything. I wasn't always an outsider. Once, I stood at the center of that world, Juliet's world. Her husband, her partner, her so-called equal. I was the man who held her shaking hands when her first boutique opened, and the one who stayed up nights balancing her books when her dream felt like a nightmare. I sketched her storefront on the back of a napkin at a diner we couldn't afford. poured sweat and ideas into turning her fashion fantasies into a brand the Whitmores could finally brag about. But I was never really family. Not to them. They treated me like a novelty at first. The architect from East Side Ridge, gritty, humble, tragically gifted. Something to show off at galas when diversity became trendy. Gregory Whitmore once told a friend I was Juliet's project with potential. That should have been the first red flag. Instead, I smiled through every backhanded compliment, convinced love would make the difference. It didn't. It started unraveling slowly. Little things. Claudia correcting my grammar in front of donors. Juliet laughing too hard when I mispronounced the name of a French designer. Her father recommending I take fewer meetings, focus more on being supportive. Then came that night. A Whitmore family dinner. White linen, long crystal glasses, conversation sharp enough to draw blood. Juliet wore this red dress that hugged her like it had been stitched by devotion itself. I remember watching her laugh at something her cousin said, her eyes flitting to mine, and I thought, maybe we were still okay. But halfway through dessert, I saw Claudia whisper something into Gregory's ear. He nodded once, expression unreadable. The table kept chatting, smiling, toasting. I had no idea that while I was eating their creme brulee, they were finalizing my eviction. I came home that night, stomach full but chest tight. Something felt wrong. The porch light wasn't on. The door was locked. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Wrong key, faulty lock. I tried again. Then again. My key wouldn't turn. I knocked. No answer. I circled to the back, where we used to sneak out to the garden with wine and stolen kisses, and found 2 suitcases waiting on the porch bench. Mine. Lined up like a goodbye. My phone buzzed. Juliet. No explanation. No apology. Just 4 words. You'll land on your feet. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, mind racing. I called her. She didn't pick up. Minutes later, Gregory pulled up in his black Jaguar. Stepped out with that corporate calm he wore like armor. No tie, just power and entitlement rolled into one. This is for the best, he said, like he was doing me a favor. You'll thank us later. Then he left. And that was it. No confrontation. No tears. Just an unspoken decision made over brandy and privilege. I remember sitting beside my suitcases under that cold porch light. The silence louder than any scream. I stared at that door, our door, wondering how love could be that quiet when it ended. They didn't just break up with me. They deleted me. In the weeks that followed, I disappeared from the website of Juliet's boutique. My bio gone. My sketches replaced. Even my photos at store openings vanished. It was like I'd never existed. People we used to call friends stopped answering my calls. Texts went unread. Social invites vanished. I tried to sleep in my car the first night. I told myself it was temporary. By the 3rd night, the lie cracked. I moved onto a friend's couch, Terrence, one of the few who didn't disappear with the rest. I owe him more than he knows. I'd walk through the city in those days with nothing but a sketch pad and a numb'ache in my chest. I remember seeing one of my old storefront designs downtown, Juliet's name glowing on the sign like it had always been hers alone. A stranger posed for a selfie in front of it. They called her an icon of elegance and originality in the article I read later that night. My designs. My concept. My hands. But to the world? Her legacy. That was the hardest part, not the couch, or the hunger, or the humiliation, but the silence. No one came to check on me. Not Juliet. Not her family. Not even the ones who once toasted me at our wedding with expensive champagne and fake affection. They didn't just throw me out. They rewrote the narrative. Made me the man who left. The man who failed. Who couldn't keep up. But the truth? They were afraid of what I could become without them. And that's exactly what I planned to show them. Rock bottom wasn't a metaphor for me. It was a real place. A one-room studio that smelled like yeast and burnt coffee, perched above a bakery where the oven never stopped humming. The walls were cracked, the radiator clanged like it was angry to still be alive, and my only window looked out onto an alley where trash cans outnumbered people. But it was mine. A door I could lock. A roof I could sleep under without listening for a car engine or the footsteps of someone coming to kick me out again. I worked odd jobs, freelance drafting mostly. Small-time stuff for underfunded contractors who didn't care if you had a firm name or a logo, just that you delivered. I'd sketch up kitchen renovations, redesign basements, draw patios for suburban families who wanted to pretend they were in Tuscany. I'd deliver furniture on weekends, my back aching from lifting luxury couches into homes I could never afford. But even at my lowest, I never stopped drawing. My sketchbook was my constant. While the world ignored me, it listened. I poured ideas into it like it was a vault, cityscapes I imagined, commercial spaces that pulsed with life, neighborhoods that breathed. When I was exhausted, broke, invisible, I still designed. That's when I met Terrence Clay. He wasn't flashy. No cufflinks, no gold watch. Just a kind face worn down by years of deadlines and disappointment. He saw me at a community design expo where I'd hung a few renderings on a sad, unlit corkboard next to a table of free pins. I didn't even expect anyone to notice. But Terrence stared at one of my designs for a good 5 minutes, one of my favorites, a modern mixed-use structure designed to look like it grew out of the earth. "You did this?" he asked. I nodded, unsure if I should feel proud or ashamed. "I've got a small development firm," he said. "We do mid-budget work. Nothing flashy. But I could use someone with vision." That's how it started. The first job was nothing, just drawing floor plans for a low-income housing project in Westlake. I did it in 2 days and emailed it back. Thought that would be it. But then came another job. Then another. Soon, I was no longer just the guy sketching in the background. I was offering design insight, running point on meetings, visiting sites. We worked late nights out of his garage-turned office, drinking bitter coffee and dreaming about better cities. After 6 months, Terrence said, "Let's stop being quiet about what we're building. Let's put both our names on this." We called it Clay and Knox Urban Designs. It was humble at first. Small office, smaller budget. But we worked smart. Took the jobs no one else wanted. Redeveloped flood zones. Converted abandoned strip malls into community centers. The money wasn't glamorous, but the impact? That was everything. By the end of year 3, our name was on contracts across the state. By year 5, we were competing with legacy firms. By year 7, we were being mentioned in national design journals, praised for revitalizing cities without erasing their soul. Our headquarters moved to a glass building downtown, designed by me, of course. Staff grew. Influence multiplied. Investors called. Mayors invited us to ribbon cuttings. And I still remembered the night I slept in my car, watching condensation fog up the windows, my heart feeling like a wound that wouldn't close. Now, I walked into meetings in suits tailored better than Juliet's wedding gown. I flew first class. I spoke on urban policy panels. And not once, did I send a single press release to the Whitmores. I let my work speak. Because success is loud in the right rooms. I knew they'd hear about me eventually. I imagined them flipping through an issue of Modern Builder and seeing my name under a headline about a $1 billion redevelopment plan. I pictured Claudia's face tightening, Gregory folding the page sharply, Juliet pretending not to care while Googling me in private. But still, I said nothing. Until fate sent me an invitation. It was a gala for a nonprofit called Urban Futures, a group Clay and Knox had quietly supported for years. The Whitmores were hosting it, proudly splashing their names across every banner. They never realized I had joined the nonprofit's board 6 months prior. When the coordinator emailed to thank me for my contributions and offered VIP access to the event, I didn't hesitate. I RSVP'd yes. No pseudonym. No modesty. Silas Knox Whitmore. Yes, I had kept the name. Not because I needed theirs, but because I wanted them to live with mine. The man they erased? He'd become the storm they never prepared for. And now? I wasn't just walking back into their world. I was redesigning it. Some weapons don't make noise. They don't explode or cut. They don't need blood or bruises to leave damage. Some weapons are silent, built from restraint, precision, and timing. I became one of those. While the Whitmores paraded around in champagne-drenched circles, still clinging to the illusion of control, I was designing cities. They bragged about gala turnouts and new store launches. I signed deals with government officials and urban renewal boards. They stayed loud. I chose silence. Not because I was afraid to speak, but because I knew when I finally did, it would be impossible to ignore. Clay and Knox Urban Designs didn't need commercials or glittering press releases. We let our work do the talking. Neighborhoods once left behind were now vibrant again, parks, schools, clean transit routes, affordable housing that didn't look like punishment. We took cities that were falling apart and helped stitch them back together, block by block. We built hope in concrete form. Our firm opened satellite offices in New York, Atlanta, San Diego. Quiet expansions. Nothing flashy. No need to flex. People came to us because we delivered on time, with vision and integrity. And still, I said nothing publicly about what happened years ago. Not about Juliet. Not about the Whitmores. not about the empire they built on a man they erased. But then came the invitation. A gala hosted by the Whitmore family, benefiting Urban Futures, a nonprofit I'd joined the board of 6 months prior. It was almost poetic. In their rush to be seen as philanthropic darlings, they'd failed to realize that the very organization they were boosting already had my fingerprints on it. The event coordinator, nice woman, probably didn't even know the history, sent me a warm, personalized email. Thanked me for my consistent support. Offered me a VIP ticket and encouraged me to attend in person. I remember sitting in my office when I read the email. Floor-to-ceiling windows flooded the room with light. My desk, custom-made from reclaimed wood, felt cool under my fingertips as I stared at the screen. The irony was rich, but the opportunity? Priceless. So I made a call. Told the coordinator I'd be there. No hesitation. No disguises. When she asked what name to print on my pass, I answered without pause, Silas Knox Whitmore. I heard the click of her keyboard through the line. She read it back to me. The name that still had weight in their world. The name they thought I'd scrubbed off like a bad tattoo. I just want to confirm, Whitmore is still your legal surname, she asked politely. Yes, I said. I kept it. Not because it belonged to them, but because I had earned it. Because it was tied to every blueprint, every contract, every award I'd built after they shut me out. Because every time someone in their circle saw it stamped across a project that changed lives, they'd be forced to remember the man they tried to discard. And now, I wasn't coming back with bitterness in my chest or vengeance on my breath. I came armed with the quiet weapon I had forged from years of silence success. But I wasn't just attending. I had a plan. Because a few weeks before the gala, I discovered something. Something ugly. Something criminal. Juliet had never stopped using my designs. At first, it was a rumor, an intern at a planning office recognizing my signature style on a new Whitmore Foundation development. I brushed it off. Coincidence, maybe. But curiosity turned to suspicion. I had my team run checks. Quietly, discreetly. Then I hired a digital forensics consultant. We dug deeper. And there it was. Designs that were unmistakably mine. Blueprints I had drawn during our marriage. Sketches I never published, never approved for commercial use. Somehow, they had been dusted off, repackaged, and stamped with her name. Worse, federal grant applications had been filed using credentials that traced back to my old login info. Signatures that were, without question, mine. Forged. I knew the strokes, the curves, the pressure points of that pen. It was identity theft wrapped in silk and stitched into the seams of designer gowns. She'd built her post-divorce brand off stolen work. I didn't rage. I didn't scream. I documented, collected, verified. Then I slid every piece of evidence, digital files, access logs, forged documents, into a sleek folder tucked inside my inner coat pocket. I wasn't attending that gala for theatrics. I was going with purpose. This wasn't a grand reveal fueled by bitterness. It was a reclamation. Years of silence had given them space to rewrite the past. Now, I was reclaiming the truth, one detail at a time. And I would do it not with chaos, but with clarity, with proof. Because sometimes, the most powerful way to return is not by knocking on the door, but by already having the keys to every room they thought you'd never enter again. It was surreal walking through those doors again. The Beaumont Hills Country Club hadn't aged. Not one bit. The marble floors still shone like polished bone, the orchids still too pristine to be real. Even the air held that same sterile perfume of wealth and preservation, like nothing had ever gone wrong here. But this time, I walked in differently. I didn't slouch. I didn't skim the room like I didn't belong. I knew exactly who I was now, and I made sure every step said so. The concierge greeted me without question. "Welcome, Mr. Whitmore," he said, checking the list and handing me a silver-trimmed pass. The irony clung to the corners of my mouth like a laugh I hadn't quite released. They had to print that name again. Swallow it. Announce it. Embrace it. I made my way toward the ballroom, my eyes gliding across the crowd already gathering jewels, tailored tuxedos, gowns stitched tighter than truths. The room glittered with money, the kind that never needed to ask questions, only make statements. And tonight, my presence was a statement. Every detail of my appearance was calculated. Charcoal suit, matte black tie, cufflinks shaped like drafting tools, a wink to who I was before they tried to erase me. But I didn't walk in looking for a spotlight. I didn't need it. The moment Claudia Whitmore saw me, the reaction did all the work. She froze. It was beautiful, how her grip on her champagne flute tightened just a little, the way her mouth parted slightly but no words came out yet. Her eyes scanned the room, as if she were looking for a staff member to blame for this breach of exclusivity. "Why is this failure here?" she finally hissed, loud enough for the nearby tables to turn their heads. There it was. That contempt. That certainty that the wall she built would always keep people like me out. But I wasn't rattled. I had walked through fire and rebuilt myself brick by brick with those same flames. Her words didn't slice anymore. They skimmed off the armor I'd forged in silence. Juliet stood just a few feet behind her mother, near the display of donated auction items. Silver shimmered down her body like liquid moonlight. She looked like everything I once fought to protect, and now wouldn't take back if offered. Her friends, the same circle of manicured vultures who once laughed at my middle-class background, fluttered around her like jeweled moths. Juliet glanced at me. No shock, no warmth. Just a smirk, smooth and practiced. "You're not on the guest list," she said, just loud enough for nearby ears. And for a moment, I almost pitied her, because she had no idea how much that sentence revealed about her. About the house of mirrors she still lived in. About the way she still thought she could dismiss a man with a sentence. I didn't react immediately. I just stared at her, then let my lips curl. "Strange," I said evenly, considering I helped fund this event. And just like that, the room tilted. Heads turned. I shifted. The whispering started before I even finished the sentence. A few people lowered their drinks. Some actually looked at their programs, maybe scanning the donor list. Claudia's flute trembled in her hand. Her painted lips thinned to a single line. Juliet's smirk didn't vanish, but it faltered. Her mouth twitched, unsure whether to laugh it off or ask for confirmation. "I'm on the Urban Futures Board," I added, my voice calm, unbothered. "And I've been one of the major contributors for the past 6 months." Now the whispers were louder. Someone said my name aloud, Silas Whitmore. The words floated above the jazz music like a dart through a balloon. Claudia recovered first. Always the seasoned social strategist. "Well," she said, voice clipped, "I suppose they let anyone donate these days." "Apparently so," I said, meeting her eyes. "But some donors also know how to read architectural blueprints." That landed. I watched her eyes narrow, the line between her brows deepen. She didn't know what I meant, but she could tell I did. Juliet stepped closer. "Are you here to cause a scene?" she asked, her tone dropping lower. There was something in her eyes now, not fear, but uncertainty. Like a chess player realizing too late that a piece was already lost 5 moves ago. "No," I replied. "I'm here to support urban revitalization." And then I walked away. I didn't need a confrontation. I didn't need applause. All I needed was that moment, the one where they realized I wasn't just some uninvited guest crashing their glittering castle. I was the man they tried to bury, and I'd come back as the architect of their reckoning. Revenge isn't always rage and theatrics. Sometimes, it's careful calculation, sharpened in silence. A slow breath before the blow. The moment I stepped into that ballroom, I wasn't improvising. I wasn't reacting. I was executing a blueprint, one I'd been drafting the moment I discovered what Juliet had done. I'd been sipping coffee one morning in my office, an article open on my tablet, a headline boasting the Whitmore Foundation's innovative designs for a new affordable housing development. The render was clean, modern, efficient, and heartbreakingly familiar. I zoomed in on the structure, and my chest tightened. It was mine. Every line, every dimension. Even the sunsplit atrium that I had sketched years ago during a sleepless night on a mattress too thin to support resentment. I remembered that design. I remembered the way I had visualized natural light bringing hope to neglected neighborhoods. Now it was being credited to her. I spent the rest of that week digging. First out of disbelief, then out of necessity. Juliet hadn't just reused one blueprint. There were multiple, stamped under her brand, dressed up in her company's pastel colors. She had rebranded my work, erased my initials, and signed her name where mine had been. Worse, she'd used them to apply for federal tax credits. Claimed grants I didn't even know existed. And those signatures? Identical to mine. I knew because I'd spent enough nights watching the way my own hand moved over paper. I'd trained that signature into muscle memory. The flourish of the S, the slight upward curl of the X in Knox. It was mine. And yet there it was, forged flawlessly. I didn't scream. I didn't call. I didn't go online to post cryptic threats. I assembled a team. Digital forensics. Legal advisors. A retired IRS consultant who owed me a favor. I wanted evidence, undeniable, time-stamped, and airtight. And they delivered. A folder full of it. Blueprints dated and compared. Metadata proving the files originated from my old drives. logins tied to my accounts, IP addresses that trace back to devices registered in Juliet's name, even email correspondence where her assistant had referred to cleaning up Silas's watermarks. When I saw that line casual, dismissive, I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. They didn't just try to erase me. They were still doing it. So I slipped every document into a slim black folder, tucked it inside the inner lining of my suit coat. It lay there like a heartbeat as I moved through the gala, smiling at donors, shaking hands, letting the illusion of civility stretch just a little longer. Because I wasn't here to scream. I wasn't here to beg for what was mine. I was here to reclaim it. I watched Juliet work the room with the confidence of a woman who'd never been told no. Her laugh was light, her posture elegant. Every smile she offered was precision-engineered for charm. The way she looked at each man was just slightly different, tailored to the balance of power between them. She had always been good at that. But now, she was walking across a floor laid with the very stones she stole. And I was the architect. I kept one eye on the stage. The charity program had Juliet listed as the keynote speaker, of course. Claudia had arranged it all, no doubt, presenting her daughter as the visionary, the philanthropist, the creative genius behind urban renewal. As the announcer introduced her, the crowd leaned in. Juliet took the stage, her silver gown shimmering beneath the lights. She gripped the microphone like it was her crown, and for a moment, she looked invincible. Tonight, she began, we celebrate the power of innovation, the transformation of neglected communities into thriving spaces, and the beauty of design with purpose. I stood near the back, sipping water, waiting. Her speech flowed like honey, perfectly rehearsed. She used all the right words. Legacy, sustainability, hope. She gestured to renderings behind her, smiling proudly as the crowd nodded and murmured their approval. They were clapping when she said, "These projects represent what the Whitmore Foundation stands for." And that's when I moved. I walked toward the stage as the lights dimmed slightly for the transition to the next speaker. I stepped onto the edge without waiting for permission. People turned. The silence gathered quickly, puzzled at first, then expectant. Juliet blinked at me, confused, annoyed. I took the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice steady, "my name is Silas Knox Whitmore, co-founder of Clay and Knox Urban Designs." The pause after my name was thick with recognition. I'd like to take a moment to clarify something. Behind me, the projection screen came to life, controlled by a member of my team at the AV booth. Side-by-side images filled the screen. My original blueprints, next to Juliet's designs. Identical. Then came the documents, federal tax filings, forged signatures, IP logs. This work was stolen, I said clearly. These blueprints were created by me, used without my knowledge, profited from illegally, and that evidence has already been submitted to the IRS and the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Gasps rippled. Cameras clicked. Claudia stood halfway out of her chair. Juliet's face went pale, paper white. Her lips parted, but no words followed. "I'm not here for revenge," I finished. "I'm here to reclaim my voice." Then I handed the mic to the stunned MC, turned, and walked off the stage as the silence boiled into noise. Some moments you can't plan for, no matter how meticulous your preparation. You think about the speech, the evidence, the fallout. But what you don't anticipate is the way silence stretches right before everything breaks. The way a room holds its breath. The way truth feels heavier than vengeance ever could. That was what I walked through when I stepped off that stage. Juliet was still frozen behind the mic stand, one manicured hand hanging midair like she'd forgotten what to do with it. Claudia was already rising to her feet, fumbling for composure with the grace of a woman who had never known the sting of public embarrassment. And the rest? A room full of money, status, and names that once ignored mine, all of them buzzing with confusion and curiosity. I didn't pause to watch it unfold. I didn't need to. My team had done their job perfectly. The slideshow behind me had clicked through each image like a trial unfolding before a jury. Blueprints I'd drawn, some from years ago, some never meant for public release, juxtaposed with Juliet's so-called innovations. The overlaps weren't subtle. They were damning. Then came the documents. Scanned copies of grant applications submitted in Juliet's name, using credentials that belonged to me. Signatures copied with such precision it would have been impressive if it hadn't been criminal. Screenshots of login timestamps from IP addresses tied to Juliet's devices. It wasn't just suspicious, it was prosecutable. And I had already submitted everything to the proper authorities before setting foot inside the event. No emotion, no desperation, just facts. Let them process that however they wanted. I moved through the crowd without a word. Faces turned, some stunned, some trying not to look like they were looking. Someone whispered my name, and I caught pieces of sentences trailing in my wake. Was that true? Those were his. That's the guy who... Security didn't stop me. They couldn't. I hadn't broken any laws. I was on the guest list, printed in bold, right above platinum-level contributor. I stepped outside into the night air. Cool, still, quieter than it should have been. My driver waited by the curb, holding the door open. I nodded once, climbed in, and let the door close behind me like the final period in a long overdue sentence. Inside the car, I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I just sat with it. The end of one war doesn't mean peace. It just means the fire's changed direction. The next 48 hours felt like a controlled burn. It started with local news, an online article barely an hour after the gala, titled, Whitmore Foundation Accused of Architectural Theft. No quotes. Just speculation. Then the flood began. Morning shows picked it up. Architectural Digest issued a cautious statement about ongoing investigations. Business magazines scrambled to update profiles that previously lauded Juliet as a rising design star. Suddenly, I wasn't just the man she erased. I was the architect reclaiming a stolen legacy. Juliet posted a statement that afternoon. A polished photo of her sitting at her desk, a gentle smile, captioned with vague sincerity. There have been recent allegations that challenge the integrity of my work. I take them seriously and have begun a thorough internal review. Internal review. Like that would erase a decade of theft. Claudia went quiet. Completely. Not even a lawyered-up soundbite. Her name stopped appearing in the social columns. The woman who once hosted charity balls for sports suddenly disappeared into silence. And me? I didn't respond to interview requests. I didn't tweet, didn't gloat. I let the noise swirl around me while I remained still. Instead, I went to work. Not at Clay and Knox, my partners handled day-to-day operations while I focused on what came next. We launched Second Draft, a foundation for underrepresented architects and designers, focused on legal protections, IP education, and community mentorship. I've been planning it for months, but now the timing was perfect. We announced our board, 10 members, diverse, talented, resilient. Not a single Whitmore among them. My inbox overflowed. Messages from young designers, independent contractors, artists who had been bullied or stolen from or silenced. They wrote things like, "Thank you," and "Now I know I'm not crazy," and they tried to erase me too. That mattered more than any headline. I didn't set out to be a hero. I wasn't interested in the spotlight, but I did believe in justice, and in the right of every creator to claim their work. That week, Clay and Knox stock rose by 17%. Investors called. Partners doubled down. Meanwhile, Whitmore properties plummeted. Sponsors pulled out of future events. Boutique deals vanished. But I didn't lift a finger to destroy them. They did it to themselves. All I did was tell the truth. And now the world was finally listening. I expected fallout. I expected backlash. What I didn't expect was how quiet the collapse would be. The Whitmores had always been a noise-making machine. Parties, press releases, charity events covered in velvet and crystal. But after the gala, the silence was sudden, surgical. Like someone had yanked the plug from a life support machine and let their legacy go cold. The news cycle didn't care about discretion. It devoured everything. Headlines blared. Heiress accused of stealing architect's work. Whitmore Designs under federal investigation. Justice for Silas Whitmore? That last one made me pause. Justice? I hadn't thought of it like that. I hadn't sought a courtroom verdict or a public apology. What I wanted was truth, returned to its rightful owner. What I needed was acknowledgement, if not from them, then from the world that once looked through me like I was made of glass. Within days, requests poured in. Podcasts, interviews, op-eds. Young architects wrote long messages filled with stories of betrayal and stolen dreams. Designers who'd been underpaid, overworked, ghost-ridden. People who knew what it meant to pour their soul into a project and watch someone else slap their name on it. I read every word. I didn't respond to every message, but I carried them with me. They became fuel. Proof that this fight was never just about blueprints or stolen credits. It was about every voice silenced for convenience. I didn't talk to Juliet. I didn't need to. Her silence online was loud enough. No apology, no denial, just a slowly vanishing presence from the design world she once ruled. Her company issued a bland statement about restructuring and internal reflection. They blamed a junior associate. I almost laughed when I read that, how quick they were to throw someone else under the bus, just like they had with me. But I didn't care who took the fall. I wasn't watching for punishment. I was watching for transformation. And that's when I knew it was time to launch the one thing I had built in the shadows, second draft. It had started as a scribble on a napkin during a red-eye flight. A half-formed idea I couldn't shake, a foundation dedicated to protecting independent designers. To give them tools I never had. Contracts written in their favor. Legal teams that didn't cost a year's rent. A place where creators could learn how to protect their work before someone else stole it. I used my own funds to launch it quietly, no fanfare, no champagne. Just a simple post on the Clay and Knox website with a mission statement that read, "Second chances belong to those who never had a first one." We staffed it with people who'd lived the story, independent artists, whistleblower attorneys, IP experts who'd fought copyright wars and won. Our board was intentionally built from the forgotten. First-gen architects, immigrants, women, and men who'd been undermined, overlooked, and still chose to keep building. Within a week, we had our first 100 applicants. Within 2, that number tripled. People wanted help. More than that, they wanted someone to believe them. And I did. Because I had once been the guy with sketches in his backpack and no one to fight for him. The man locked out of his own home, erased from his own legacy. I knew what that ache felt like. I knew how betrayal didn't just steal your work, it made you question whether you were ever good enough to begin with. So I made myself available. Quietly. No stages, no interviews. Just a man with an open door. One morning, I walked into the second draft office. Bare walls, minimal furniture, sunlight pouring in through bare windows, and found a handwritten letter on my desk. No return address. No email. Just a note in tight, anxious script. I was going to quit. I thought they won. But then I saw what you did. And now I'm sketching again. I sat with that note for a long time. That was the moment it hit me. This, not the revenge, not the fallout, not even the justice. This was the victory. That somewhere, someone picked up their pencil again. That someone who had nearly given up chose to stay in the fight. That was worth more than headlines or settlements or satisfaction. That was legacy. And in the silence that followed the storm, I could finally hear what mattered. It wasn't the applause. It was the quiet rustle of pages turning again, of creators sketching again, of voices rising, no longer asking permission to be seen. And I had helped build that, not from spite, but from blueprint. I hadn't planned to see her again. Not in person. Not like this. Weeks had passed since the gala. The headlines had cooled, the noise dialed down. Clay and Knox had signed 2 new contracts, one in Baltimore, the other in Portland. Second draft was steadily growing. I'd buried myself in purpose, kept my schedule packed enough that I wouldn't have to think about Juliet or Claudia or that fractured world I'd left behind. But fate has a sense of irony. It was a Saturday, early afternoon. I was speaking on a panel for a local civic design expo, nothing flashy, just community architects, students, and a few city planners gathered in a stuffy civic hall that smelled like old varnish and forgotten school projects. I liked it. No one here cared about designer labels or which foundation I'd embarrassed. They were builders of spaces of hope. I finished my talk on adaptive reuse and was browsing the student exhibits when I saw her. Juliet. She was standing near a display on sustainable mixed-use buildings, her hands folded awkwardly in front of her, her eyes scanning a blueprint that didn't belong to her. My breath caught, not from longing, not anymore, but from surprise. She looked different. Smaller. Not physically, but in presence. The shimmer, the untouchable glow she once wore like armor, was gone. Her hair was pulled into a neat ponytail, no diamonds at her ears, no entourage trailing behind her. Just her. Alone. For a moment, I wondered if she'd pretend not to see me. I turned to leave quietly, respectfully. I didn't need confrontation. I didn't need to rehash anything. But then she looked up. Silas, she said. Not with venom. Not with ice. Just soft. Almost hesitant. I stopped, exhaled slowly, and turned to face her. Juliet. We stood there for a beat, strangers stitched together by memory. The silence between us wasn't tense. It was tired. Like 2 people who had run through the same storm from opposite sides of the street. She stepped toward me. You didn't return my message, she said. I raised an eyebrow. Which one? Her lips twitched, embarrassed. I sent you an email after the gala. I didn't expect a reply. But I needed to say something. I nodded but said nothing. There was nothing left in me that needed closure. I had already written my final chapter. She was a paragraph in the middle, important once, but no longer the ending. She shifted her weight. I came today to see the new talent, to remember what this used to feel like. Before it became a brand. I asked. I wasn't cruel, just honest. She winced, but didn't deny it. I got lost, she admitted. In the name. The expectations. My mother's voice in my head. She paused. I think somewhere along the way I stopped being a designer. I just became someone who managed impressions. I nodded again. I wasn't here to absolve her. That wasn't mine to give. I always envied the way you saw things, she said. Not just the buildings, but the people in them. The way you designed for someone, not around them. It was the closest she'd ever come to giving me credit. I studied her face, and for the first time in years, I didn't see the woman who locked me out of my own home. I saw someone older, humbled, a little broken maybe. The kind of broken that happens when the mirror cracks and no one is left to lie to you. I hope you find your way back to that version of yourself, I said. The one who used to dream out loud and sketch without fear. She swallowed, eyes shining. I'm trying. I gave her a nod. Nothing more. Nothing less. Then I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. Not out of pride, but because I no longer needed anything from that moment. I'd already faced the ghost. And the strange thing? She didn't haunt me anymore. I walked past more booths, more hopeful designers explaining their ideas with the kind of enthusiasm that reminded me why I ever picked up a pencil in the first place. That's what stayed with me, not the past. The future. The people building in the shadows. The ones who hadn't been discovered, or erased, or crushed under legacy. They were the ones worth turning toward. And as I stepped out into the sunlight that afternoon, I felt it, lightness. The absence of weight I hadn't even known I was carrying until it was gone. That day didn't end in fanfare or confrontation. No apologies carved in stone. No final, cinematic goodbye. Just a man who kept walking. And a woman who finally understood why he had to. I wake up each morning with sunlight spilling through glass I designed myself. The house is perched just high enough above the city that I can see the skyline stretch like a promise in the distance, not a threat. This home wasn't bought, it was built. Every beam, every window, every line of its structure is something I drew with my own hand. It's quiet here. Not the emptiness of exile, but the peace that follows reclamation. There's something strange about surviving the storm and realizing you're still standing. You expect to feel triumphant, like every breath should be fireworks. But the truth is quieter. It's in the slow sip of coffee on a quiet patio. It's in the knowing glance at your reflection when you don't flinch anymore. It's in hearing your name said without pity or mockery. My name is on blueprints from coast to coast now. Clay and Knox Urban Designs is no longer just a firm, it's a movement. We don't just develop property, we build futures. Our designs prioritize dignity, beauty, and sustainability in places most developers overlook. And people have noticed. TED Talks, podcast interviews, university lectures. I've been asked to speak in rooms that once would have scoffed at my story. Not because I chased fame, but because the work made noise on its own. I've been called visionary, revolutionary, even brave. But I'm none of those things. I'm just someone who told the truth and refused to back down when it made people uncomfortable. I never needed to destroy the Whitmores. They did that themselves. Their empire was made of polished lies and borrowed brilliance. All I did was hold up a mirror. Let the world see what had always been there. Juliette disappeared from the spotlight. Her boutique chain folded under the weight of lawsuits and public distrust. Claudia sold off 2 properties and withdrew from the board of 3 foundations. Gregory relocated to Europe under the pretense of expanding international investments. No public apologies. No confessions. Just a slow, silent crumbling. I didn't gloat. Because by then, I had already moved on. Second Draft has become more than I ever imagined. We've protected dozens of small designers from IP theft. We've helped artists patent their work, trained them to negotiate fair contracts, even funded scholarships for first-gen architecture students. The stories that come through our doors now? They remind me why I ever picked up a pencil. They remind me of the boy sketching buildings in the back of a public school classroom, dreaming of homes that didn't leak and streets that didn't trap you in. That boy would have been proud of the man I've become. There are still hard days. Moments when I look at an old design Juliette once claimed and feel the sting of betrayal all over again. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if they'd never locked me out. If they treated me like family instead of charity, would I have stayed? Would I have settled? Maybe. And that's the scariest thought of all. Because in their attempt to erase me, they freed me. Freed me to become something they never would have allowed. freed me to outgrow the version of myself who needed their approval, freed me to build without begging for permission. I don't wear vengeance anymore. It served its purpose, but it's too heavy to carry forever. These days, I wear purpose, peace, progress, and a quiet kind of pride that doesn't need to shout. Every now and then, I get letters from people who say I inspired them. They thank me for being loud in a world that wanted them to stay quiet. They think I'm brave, but I tell them the truth. Bravery isn't about confrontation. It's about endurance. It's about standing up when the world insists you sit down. It's about drawing one more line when they try to steal the page. And now, as I sit at the drafting table by my window, pen in hand, fresh sketchpad open, I understand what legacy really is. It's not about fame. It's not about being remembered by name. It's about what you leave behind for those who come after. It's about blueprints no one can steal, no matter how hard they try. Because the truth is fire. And when it finally catches, it doesn't ask permission. It just burns away the lies until only what's real remains. That's what they could never take from me. And that's what I'll keep building from, one honest line at a time.